this is the most important thing that we could possibly do. We should do so very, very carefully. Very, very carefully.
Really playing a crazy game here. This is crazy. We should not do this. It's very dangerous.
It's very important that we take action today to recognize that we are making a very significant change to the chemical constituency of the atmosphere and the oceans, and one that is almost impossible to reverse. I think, when we look back on these days in the future, we want to be able to say that we did the actions that were right, the actions that were important, because I think it's very difficult to say, if you go, say, 20, 30, 40 years in the future, what do you say to your kids or your grandkids? It's like the scientists all say that these bad things are going to happen. It's like 97%. So like say, well, to your grandkids or kids, like, well, did nobody tell you? No, it's like, no, everyone was telling us. Okay, so why didn't you do anything? What's the answer?
We're really playing a crazy game here with the atmosphere and the oceans. We're taking vast amounts of carbon from deep underground and putting this in the atmosphere. This is crazy. We should not do this. It's very dangerous. So we should accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. The bizarre thing is that obviously we're going to run out of oil in the long term. There's only so much oil we can mine and burn. It's tautological. We must have a sustainable energy transport and energy infrastructure in the long term. So we know that's the end point. We know that. So why run this crazy experiment where we take trillions of tons of carbon from underground and put it in the atmosphere and oceans? This is an insane experiment. It's the dumbest experiment in human history. Why are we doing this? It's crazy.
I think currently that what we're doing right now, which is mining and burning trillions of tons of hydrocarbons that used to be buried very deep underground, and now we're sticking them in the atmosphere and running this crazy chemical experiment on the atmosphere. And then you've got the oil and gas companies, which have ungodly amounts of money. And you can't expect them to just roll over and die. Like, they don't do that. Actually, what they much prefer to do is spend enormous amounts of money lobbying and running bogus ad campaigns and that kind of thing to preserve their situation. It's a lot like tobacco companies in the old days. They used to run these ads with doctors, like a guy with a doctor, pretending he's a doctor, essentially implying that smoking is good for you, and like having pregnant mothers on ads smoking. The point is that is look at it from the other side. So, what do you think the percentage chance is of this being catastrophic for some meaningful percentage of the Earth's population? Is it greater than 1%? Is it even 1%? If it is even 1%, why are we running this experiment?
The more carbon we take out of the ground and add to the atmosphere, and a lot of it gets permeated into the oceans, the more dangerous it is. It's very difficult to put that CO2 back in the ground. It doesn't like being in solid form.
Fundamentally, we have a delayed gratification issue collectively as a species. Like, are we willing to sacrifice the near term for the long term or not? At some point we will have no choice, because we'll run out of hydrocarbons to mine and burn, and we'll have to transition to a sustainable energy economy. So sooner or later, we've got to go towards a solar electric future. It's better for the future of Earth if we go sooner than later.
The lack of people is obviously a threat to civilization.
I think that the biggest problem the world will face in 20 years is population collapse. Collapse. I agree. I want to emphasize this. The biggest issue in 20 years will be population collapse. Not explosion, collapse.
We are going to face, in the mid part of the century, and particularly the latter part of the century, a demographic implosion, the likes of which we haven't seen, including the Black Plague. The math is obvious. 3 generations of 50% birth rate, of 50% replacement rate, gets you to 12% of where you were. And those poor 12%, all they're going to be doing is taking care of their grandparents. I mean, eventually there just won't be people at that rate.
The danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads by a lot. And nobody would suggest that we allow anyone to just build nuclear warheads if they want. That would be insane. And mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far. So why do we have no regulatory oversight? This is insane.
You've expressed your reservations about AI and your fears about that.
Yeah, I just think the singularity is probably the right word, because we just don't know what's going to happen once there's intelligence substantially greater than that of a human brain.
Yeah. And do you think, because there's been a lot of sci-fi about AI, series like Humans, etc., it's entering the mainstream, entering the public discourse, that people are understanding the ethical dangers and the, I guess, physical dangers that AI could potentially pose?
I mean, most of the movies and TV featuring AI, they don't describe it in quite the way it's likely to actually take place. But I think you just have to consider, like, even in the benign scenario where if AI is much smarter than a person, what do we do?
Yeah.
What job do we have?
So the rate of improvement is really dramatic. We have to figure out some way to ensure that the advent of digital superintelligence is one which is symbiotic with humanity. I think that's the single biggest existential crisis that we face, and the most pressing one. It's really all about laying the groundwork to make sure that if humanity collectively decides that creating digital superintelligence is the right move, then we should do so very, very carefully. Very, very carefully. This is the most important thing that we could possibly do.
Well, a better approach or better outcome is that we achieve democratization of AI technology, meaning that no one company or small set of individuals has control over advanced AI technology. I think that's very dangerous. It could also get stolen by somebody bad, like some evil dictator of a country could send their intelligence agency to go steal it and gain control. It just becomes a very unstable situation, I think, if you've got any incredibly powerful AI. You just don't know who's going to control that. So I think we must have democratization of AI technology and make it widely available. And that's the reason that obviously Yumi and the rest of the team created OpenAI, was to help spread out AI technology so it doesn't get concentrated in the hands of a few.